I don't know how many times I've seen this where marketing people are scored based on the number of conversations that they're able to land and hand over to their sales team, but they're not scored on the quality of those conversations. How likely are those people to actually convert into customers? Do they meet the customer profile all the way through or just on the surface? And so that's a big disconnect in companies.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the eMarketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm here today with DeAnn Campbell, who's a retail expert at AAG and attends a lot of conferences, speaking, advising, has a bunch of clients. So I'm really excited to chat with her about a bunch of topics relating to retail and B2B. So feel free to self-introduce yourself. But the first question I've got for you really relates to something you had written about in the past, which is go-to-market strategy. And do you feel like most companies have sufficiently updated their go-to-market strategies, or do you think that they sort of sit there stale and don't get the level of TLC that they need?
Well, thanks very much for having me on your podcast, Kevin. I appreciate it. I really don't think that companies are lacking a playbook so much as the one that they have is really outdated. It's been stretched to the max. It can't be patched or accommodated anymore. And I think that this creates kind of a place where businesses are stuck a little bit. They're not clear how to go forward because what they have isn't working. They don't really have the money to completely reinvent themselves. That's a very scary proposition. Finding the funding to update your tech stack or redo your marketing positioning from scratch. That's hard to come by. And so I think that's the biggest problem. Rather than not having the playbook,
do they usually find themselves, due to budget constraints, just putting Band-Aids on the one that they've got? Or do they sometimes really blow it up and start from scratch?
Exactly. Especially if recession is looming, you really don't want to go out on a limb and spend a lot of money. So what can we do to make what we have work? How can we get by with less? How can we date on it and stretch it? And it's fine for a while. That does work, but there always comes that point when it just won't work anymore. And you really have to roll up your sleeves, spend the time and the money, and try to figure out what your next step is.
Great. My next question relates to B2B, where you spend a lot of your time. And one thing I've always noticed with B2B clients, and ourselves included, is that in B2B, sales and marketing are well aligned, right, on their KPIs, because not all leads are created equal, right? Some leads are really great from an easy conversion perspective. Some leads are really great from a lifetime customer value if you do close them perspective. And so you got to get those KPIs aligned. What are some best practices around the alignment of KPIs between sales and marketing?
I think this is one of the biggest problems, not just for B2B, but B2C as well, is that they have different teams within their company, and those teams are rewarded for different things. And too often, this is putting those teams in competition rather than in cooperation. I mean, a good example is sales is rewarded for new clients, new business, or growing an existing account. Marketing, on the other hand, is rewarded for contacts, eyeballs, likes, impressions. Quantity is kind of the measure there. And so marketing can look good when they're putting a lot of names into the top of the funnel, but if they're not converting, then they can point a finger at sales saying, well, we did our job, they didn't do their job. And that really creates an imbalance in the company. It demotivates, and it also creates kind of a weaker company position overall. I think that if marketing worked more directly with sales to really pin down the pain points of a potential client, to understand the market that client is operating within, wouldn't that create a higher quality conversation and help the sales team get specific about the conversation and be more likely to convert? And then everyone would stand a better chance of rewarding, and the company's overall revenue would benefit from that.
Yeah, those are great points. One thing that I see that's directly related to that is marketing's KPIs are often based on some kind of an average, where of course there's no such thing as an average lead, right? To use the lines from the movie, there are Glengarry leads and Glen Ross leads, right? And those have to do both from a close rate perspective, but also LTV and a bunch of other, KPIs that relate back to the health of the company. And so, we always try to figure out how to get the marketing teams to understand a little bit more about the difference between the great leads and the not so great leads, to move away from quantity and move more towards quality. So it seems like that's a journey in many cases where, maybe the technology doesn't exist to score a lead in real time, or to, predict the LTV of a lead when it comes in, or to know how to source the leads to the right salesperson and where they are in the funnel. All these elements seem like they need somebody to be the choreographer, right, of all of these leads.
They do. I don't know how many times I've seen this where marketing people are scored based on the number of conversations that they're able to land and hand over to their sales team, but they're not scored on the quality of those conversations. How likely are those people to actually convert into customers? Do they meet the customer profile all the way through, or just on the surface? And so that's a big disconnect in companies, is the quality quantity debate. And so it's a big challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I'd love to have your thoughts on is channels that B2B marketers forget to use that they should consider. Are there any channels that you think should be on a B2B marketer's list that just aren't on there as often?
Oh, that's a great question. One of the things that I see all the time is that marketing teams don't think carefully enough about their customers as they go about through their day, as the customer goes about their day, and what kind of mindset they're in at given points throughout that day. So the biggest waste of money I think I've ever seen is the giant billboards for Deloitte that you see in airport terminals. Has anybody ever hired Deloitte because of that giant ad in the airport? No, if you're traveling for business, you're stressed, you're away from home, you're uncomfortable, you're rushing, maybe you have jet lag even, you are not in a receptive mindset. And so why would you spend dollars on something like that? Why not try to connect points of contact with moments where your customer is a little more receptive and out of the box thinking, like, what about an ad in Starbucks near an office complex, for a free coffee if they scan your QR code and give you zero-party data to collect information. Maybe they don't scan it, but they will remember that you offered to buy them a cup of coffee. So it's at a time when you were receptive and you had a moment to wait. Thinking about what your customer is doing at any given moment. And the other thing is digital is kind of becoming maxed out a little bit. Your inbox is full of spam. We're tired of it. So print is becoming kind of a little bit of an untapped resource, but in a creative and helpful way. So, I think old school classy is making a comeback.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, right? Because the QR code came back from the graveyard or during the pandemic because people couldn't order in restaurants without knowing how to use them, and so as a result, we've seen some real successes among clients in using QR codes on billboards, right? So if you are going to go through if you are going to make the decision you want to be in that airport, at least put in a call to action with a QR code, right?
My business card's a QR code, but every now and then I still have print cards, and they're very nice print cards, and it's kind of interesting how that can get somebody's attention too when you hand them this nice card instead of exchanging V cards.
Yeah, we've also I invented a technology that puts a custom QR code on every piece of direct mail, right? And so the each piece is uniquely QR coded. And so if there's an interesting call to action on that, that allows sort of an ABM style deployment of marketing dollars into direct mail to create, hopefully high quality leads for B2B marketers. So, I think your point is extremely well taken, right? Think about where the person is in their buying journey. Think about where they are sort of literally like in their day, and whether or not the marketing touch point that you're providing aligns with where they are mentally, where they are physically, is it the right message, right time, right place? And so I think a lot of marketing plans could get better if people just applied that as a layer.
It does. And that goes right back to the KPI discussion. The question we talked about a moment ago is, are you rewarding your marketing teams for quantity or for quality, and giving them a pass on having to get X number of leads into the funnel, and helping them try to think outside the box. And maybe they don't get as many leads, but those leads are much more receptive to a conversation and much more likely to convert. But then that is completely rethinking the KPIs of that marketing team. And it can be scary. I only got three leads this month, but man, they were good leads. So why can't that be okay? Why can't that be the goal, instead of I got 20 leads, but none of them were of any use, or one of them was useful?
Yeah, another thing I'd love your perspective on is we found that, once you've sort of built your dream database of all the people you'd like to have conversations with, and they're still prospects, that it's been helpful for some of our B2B clients to think about them as not just business people, right? Yes. And from that perspective, don't just think about where they are when they have their business hat on, but think about where they are in general. One of the areas, for example, is use B2B to their home addresses, use B2B messaging to their home addresses, not just their work addresses, especially with work from home. And the other is using some social media channels that you wouldn't think of as B2B channels, right? Yeah. So, the Instagram, Facebook combo can work really well for B2B once you know who the people are, who you'd like to target, and with custom audiences and audience overlays, you can do some really fun stuff there. I don't know if you've heard through the grapevine of successes in that kind of way about thinking about the individuals holistically as opposed to just wearing business hats.
You have to think about them as people, not as just business people. And one example I've seen that was incredible, I'm talking about it today, and it's been 3 years, was I was on a call, a group call. We were talking about a donut client, a large chain making donuts. And during the meeting, our doorbell rang, and the person hosting the meeting said, "You better go get that right now. I'll wait." And they had Uber Eats all of us donuts to eat during the meeting. And it just is one of those things that is such a lovely touch. And as you said with Did It, having our home addresses enabled that. So
yeah, absolutely. Changing gears a little bit, right? The regulatory framework, usually in the United States, businesses have enjoyed a little bit more flexibility with regards to information that we have on prospects, and being able to have CRM databases or Salesforce automation, which no one uses that term anymore, right? It's all considered CRM. But businesses now have to sort of treat their B2B databases in the same way they might treat their consumer databases, which has a bunch of additional, sort of punch list items you need to empower your data points, who are people, to be able to do. Do you feel like businesses are ready for that?
I think that sales and marketing teams are going to need to find new ways to understand what the customer is about, and spend some money on it, and investing more in proof of concepts so that you have solid use cases to use to sell, and test out how people react to that proof of concept. So you're developing your own first party and zero party data, going to more trade shows and interacting face to face with clients, and investing in research as well to really understand the marketplace, so you can personalize your sales approach. Those are slower and more expensive, but they're definitely an alternative to the loss of some of the data.
Certainly in B2B, increasingly this myth of the single decision maker, right? Everybody loves the idea that, if I just talk to Bob or Sally, I'll get the deal, right? And it's not always as easy as that, because you've got influencers to the decision maker, some of whom have veto power, but not really decision power. And sort of how does that change the go-to-market strategy, right? When you're dealing with these multifaceted, sometimes hidden people that are part of the committee.
It is incredibly challenging. I call it death by committee, but that's the biggest challenge, I think, for sales these days, is identifying the decision makers and the influencers to the decision. And it's really, really hard. There really isn't a good, clear way. That's the secret sauce to a successful salesperson, I guess, is being able to hunt down those people. I think that it's really important to first take a look at the business as a whole that you're selling into. You have to understand as best you can what their process is. And one of the things that we do a lot of are interviews, buyer interviews. And we're not interviewing a company or a person to sell them something. We're interviewing them just for general research. Therefore, they're a lot more forthcoming in sharing information and being helpful. And so that gives us an overall picture on a company and a marketplace on how decisions are structured. One of the things we're finding is there is no one size fits all anymore. If you look at a technology decision, even some companies, that decision is really the final piece of the decision is made by IT. Other companies, it's marketing. Even if it's something like putting digital screens in a store, is it operations? Is it marketing? Is it the executive team? Is it IT? And so what you really need to do is understand all of the hands that touch that product and approach them and ask them for feedback on how things work in that department. And that way you're at least stacking the deck in your favor. If, for example, you're selling in a digital screen system into a store, if you've talked to IT and you understand what their tech stack is, you understand what the challenges are to integrating the CMS and the hardware and software into the store, and you've already figured out how you're going to address all that, by the time the decision gets to the final committee, they know you've cleared it through IT, and that makes it kind of an effortless decision for them. Is okay, IT is going to be okay with it. All these other people are going to be okay with it. We're not going to upset anybody. We're not going to create challenges. That at least helps that committee to make the decision without ruffling feathers and activating politics and even affecting, impacting operations.
Great. Yeah, those are excellent points and advice for folks going into a committee-style decision-making process, or at least situations where there are third parties that are going to be impacted by a sales decision having been made. A lot of brands, we've had to help them find the ways to get messages to their consumers using influencers, right? Because these particular segments of the market, they have ad blockers turned on. They're not heavy email users, right? They don't watch any TV. They don't listen to traditional radio. So you obviously have to change up the media mix for these individuals and include influencers, because you can't ad block an influencer when the influencer talks about something. And I'm curious whether you think influencers belong in the B2B the B2B marketing plan. I know I like to try to figure out how to weave them in, but I'd love to hear your point of view on how should businesses use influencers in their marketing plan.
I love that. No, I think influencers have a definite place. Today's landscape has become really challenging because you have platforms and people that are rising and falling in our society all the time. Adidas backed Kanye, and he kind of imploded and really impacted and hurt the brand. Twitter, if your marketing strategy is to advertise on Twitter, you're struggling to figure out what to do right now, and what are you going to do otherwise? Same thing with TikTok. If that's a big source of business for you, there's a chance that the U.S. government will regulate it away in the next year. So diversifying the number of people talking about your product is essential. And I think that having trusted advisors works now more than ever, because we have become trained to listen to trusted advisors and influencers. And we're constantly looking for reviews, but there's nothing more powerful than someone who is or has used your product saying good things about you. And that's going to become even more important in the future than it is today.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned reviews and ratings and such. Certainly Capterra and G2 and those similar platforms exist for many B2B categories, but they don't exist for everything. So, the influencer, I guess, to some extent is a secondary touch point, right? That a B2B marketer can use if people are going to be consuming certain content, because they're subject matter experts in certain categories, and that influencer can in fact influence, the decision whether it's upper funnel or at the last minute, like when the person's got it down to 2 platforms or 2 products or 2 services they're making a decision between, right? That could be the tiebreaker.
Exactly. And I think influencers can be unexpected. You can get a little bit creative with that. And that is really something that is needed in B2B sales these days. Is we're tired of the spam. We're tired of the LinkedIn contact saying, can I, do you have time for a quick? And so the need for differentiation in a meaningful way that connects the client and the client's mindset and time is extremely powerful, whether it's retail or whether it is B2B.
Absolutely. So what has you excited about 2023?
Getting back to trade shows has me very excited. We were back at trade shows a little bit last year, but it was kind of blah. Everybody was still afraid of COVID. Nobody was really quite sure what was going on. And we were really rusty. So the energy that NRF had, I wasn't there, but people on my team were there. And it was just unparalleled. And I'm heading to Euroshop this year, so I'm excited about that. But I think it's also because what I am seeing at trade shows right now and in the market in general is this high quality of technology solutions that are hitting the marketplace today. It is interesting. I think people had their heads down and they were innovating all during 2020 and 2021. And now they're coming out and they're really dialed in to what the industry wants and needs. I mean, last year was all about metaverse and crypto hype, which was kind of, it was entertaining, but it wasn't very practical. And so this year, people are turning to practical, putting down roots, boots on the ground solutions that are meaningful towards impacting top line and bottom line revenue. And not so much on the shiny toys that are fun to think about, but they take time away from what really makes sense. So we're getting to authenticity and genuine solutions that really work. And that, to me, is incredibly exciting.
That is exciting. So I'm looking forward to 2023 as well. I happen to be an investor in Beyond Ordinary Events, which has the Possible event coming up in Miami at the Fontainebleau. So I'm looking forward. That'll be their inaugural event. So
oh wow, exciting! Yeah.
And I'd love to keep in touch over the year as it evolves. And thanks so much for joining me, DeAnn.
Thank you so much.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.